1. Intro. He had everything. The penthouse view stretching over the city. The kind of career people whisper about. The confidence of a man who believed nothing could slip through his hands. But on the night Lily left, all of that, the skyline, the success, the certainty, went silent. Adrian found her sketchbook on the kitchen table, the pages trembling slightly from where her hands had lingered. And in that moment, it hit him. He had never truly heard her. Not the way she needed. Not the way love required. This is a story about a man who mistook silence for peace. Until the silence finally broke him. Before we go any deeper, make sure you subscribe to Hidden Angle Podcast, where every story reveals the truth we're all afraid to face. Now, let's begin. 2. Their beautiful start. They met on a rainy Thursday at a small Brooklyn cafe, Lily sketching quietly by the window. Adrian rushing in with the kind of storm that never touched his face but lived behind his eyes. She looked up, just for a second, and something in him softened. Not enough for anyone to notice, but enough for him to feel it. Their beginning wasn't dramatic. It was gentle, almost fragile. Coffee that turned into conversation. Conversation that turned into laughter. And laughter that turned into the kind of comfort people search years for. Adrian loved the way she listened, as if every word he said mattered. Lily loved the way he showed up, on time, prepared, steady. A man who looked like safety even when he didn't feel it himself. They built a world in small moments. Late-night grocery runs. Quiet subway rides with her head on his shoulder. Her sketching him when he wasn't looking. Him leaving handwritten notes beside her morning tea. And yet, even in the warmth of those early days, there were tiny cracks, so thin they felt harmless. His words were precise, but his silences were heavier. Her smile was bright, but her eyes dimmed whenever he brushed past her feelings. Still, neither of them noticed. Love was new, and new love forgives almost everything. 3. The first signs of silence. The first signs weren't loud. They never are. It started with the way Lily paused before speaking, as if weighing whether her feelings would land safely. She would open her mouth, then close it again when Adrian's attention drifted, just slightly. Barely enough to notice, but enough for her to feel. One evening, she tried to tell him she'd been feeling anxious for days. Adrian, without looking up from his laptop, simply said, "Did you try going for a walk? Fresh air helps." He meant well, but solutions were not what she needed. She needed him to stop, to look at her, to hear the tremble she was trying so hard to hide. Lily began speaking less, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. She learned that the quieter she became, the smoother their evenings went. He took her silence as calm, she used it as a shield. There were nights she sat beside him on the couch, heart full of words. But when he didn't notice the way her hands shook, the words dissolved before they ever reached her lips. And the tears, they arrived silently too. In the shower, under the faucet's warmth, where no one, especially Adrian, would hear them. He believed nothing was wrong. He believed peace lived in the absence of noise. But she was already fading behind the quiet she never meant to create. 4. Emotional distance. The distance didn't appear overnight. It formed slowly, like frost crawling across a window, quiet, delicate, impossible to notice until the whole glass turned cold. Dinners became quieter. Not tense, just empty. Adrian would talk about work, cases, deadlines, strategy, and Lily would nod, smiling politely, her mind drifting somewhere he never followed. Sometimes she'd try to pull him back into her world. "Look at this sketch," she'd say, lifting her notebook with a spark of hope. Later, okay? He didn't mean to dismiss her. He just didn't understand how heavy, later, felt to someone who already felt unseen. On the subway rides home, she stopped, resting her head on his shoulder. He noticed the change, but only in the way someone notices a light flickering. Acknowledging it, but never questioning why. Lily's laughter, once bright and effortless, grew softer, then rarer, until it faded into a kind of quiet he mistook for stability. And every time she swallowed her feelings instead of sharing them, a small part of her slipped further away. There were nights she lay beside him, their bodies separated by only a few inches. But emotionally, it felt like miles. She'd watch him fall asleep within minutes, while she stayed awake staring at the ceiling, wondering when loving him started to feel like being alone. Adrian thought silence meant everything was fine. No arguing, no confrontation. Peace. But in reality, it was the sound of her giving up piece by piece. Quiet enough for him not to notice. Loud enough for her to feel like she was disappearing. He still reached for her hands, sometimes out of habit, not intention. And every time his fingers barely brushed hers, she felt the truth sink deeper. You can share a home with someone and still feel like you're living on opposite sides of a closed door. 5. The night everything broke. It was supposed to be their anniversary. Lily had set the table with the good plates, the ones they never used, lit 2 small candles, and placed one of her favorite sketches in the center, Adrian laughing. Unguarded, drawn from memory. The clock passed 7. Then 8. By 9, the candles had melted into uneven pools of wax. Her phone buzzed once.
Lily?
A short message from Adrian. Big case came up. I'll be late. Don't wait up. She stared at the screen, the words blurring as her eyes filled. It wasn't the first time. But somehow, this time, something inside her didn't bend. It broke. She sat down at the untouched table, the room lit only by the last flicker of the candles. For a moment, she imagined him walking through the door, noticing everything, the effort, the sketch, the way her hands were shaking. He didn't. The door stayed closed. The first sob escaped so quietly she almost didn't recognize it as her own. Then another. And another. What hurt wasn't just that he chose work. It was that she realized she no longer expected anything different. At some point, she stood up, blew out the remaining candle, and walked to their bedroom. She pulled a small suitcase from under the bed, moving slowly, almost gently, as if packing away a version of herself that had waited long enough. On his pillow, she left a single page torn from her sketchbook. On it, beneath a faint outline of 2 distant silhouettes, she wrote, "I loved you loudly. You heard me quietly. And then, not at all." 6. The silence that shattered him. When Adrian walked through the door that night, the apartment felt wrong. Not messy. Not chaotic. Just hollow. He called her name once. Then again. Only silence answered. The kind of silence that doesn't fill a room, but empties it. He found the suitcase-sized gap in the closet first. Then the untouched dinner. And finally, in the bedroom, the note on his pillow. A single sheet with Lily's delicate handwriting. He sat down slowly, as if the weight of the air had changed. Her words were simple, but they landed like a collapse. "I needed you to hear me before I disappeared." For the first time in years, Adrian couldn't think. No strategies. No solutions. Just the echo of everything she had tried to say. All the moments he brushed past her worries. Every soft pause he never bothered to ask about. He replayed their last few months in his mind. Seeing it clearly now. How her voice shrank. How her smile dimmed. How her presence became quieter than his ambition. And then it hit him. She hadn't left because she stopped loving him. She left because she stopped believing he could feel her. The silence wrapped around him, sharp and suffocating. And for the first time, Adrian understood what it meant to lose someone. Not to anger, not to betrayal, but to the very thing he built his life on. His inability to truly listen. 7. The lesson and soft ending. In the weeks after Lily left, Adrian discovered that silence has a memory. It lingers. It echoes. It fills the spaces where someone's voice used to live. He kept replaying the small moments.
Hi.
The ones he once dismissed as ordinary. The way she hesitated before speaking. The way her smile didn't reach her eyes. The way she folded into herself a little more each time he said, "Later." So he did something he had never done. He sat with the quiet. Let it hurt. Let it teach him. Therapy became a weekly appointment, not a last resort. He learned that listening isn't waiting for your turn to speak. It's choosing to hear what isn't said out loud. It's noticing the tremble in a breath, the shift in someone's tone, the way a heart asks for help without forming the words. Months passed before he saw Lily again. A small art fair in the park. Her booth glowing softly under string lights. She looked lighter, steadier, like someone who had finally returned to herself. Their eyes met. No bitterness. No accusations. Just two people acknowledging the truth between them. He approached slowly, as if afraid to disturb the peace she'd built. "Your work is beautiful," he said. "It always has been," she replied. And in that simple exchange, they both understood something. Love doesn't always mean forever. Sometimes, it means learning what broke you, so you never break someone the same way again. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Tell me in the comments what part stayed with you. Tap the like button if you felt the truth in it. And don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Angle Podcast for more stories that whisper to the heart long after the screen goes dark.